Hey, it's Marissa. This is going to be a different video than you're used to seeing. I thought it would be fun to do a haunted house stories compilation. These are all personal stories from people that I know personally. It's either happened to them directly or they know somebody that these things have happened to. So these are all stories that have happened in Wisconsin. There's one that has not, that I just included anyway as a bonus. But just a disclaimer that if you do not like scary things, do not watch this video. This is not the video for you. Maybe go and watch some of the other videos like my closing gift videos or Week in My Life. Definitely don't watch this one because you might have trouble sleeping tonight. But if you love spooky stuff like I do, then stick around. So get your comfies on and chill out in your bed or on your couch. Maybe you have a buddy for these stories. I also made a mug of chai tea with some coffee creamer in it. It's just French vanilla creamer and it is so good, and it's definitely got all the fall vibes going on. And we also have a candle lit, so get cozy and get ready to hear some spooky stories. So these stories are really in order of which I received them. Not really any specific order besides that. We've got a really creepy one to start off, and then we've got a couple smaller ones that don't have like a huge storyline or anything like that. And then we end it with like probably, I would say 6 or 7 that have kind of longer storylines. So here we go. Here's number 1. And this is from my boyfriend's mom. She actually knew this woman who experienced this. So she did not experience this personally, but she had a friend who did. So here we go. A married couple lived in a house in Kaukauna with their baby. The husband worked second shifts, so the wife was often left home alone at night with the baby. She noticed things that would get moved around at times. Certain things in the bathroom would be turned around. Sometimes the remote would be placed in a different spot than it was left. The wife never really thought much of it. She figured maybe the husband had moved it. There was one night where the wife heard something fall in the baby's room and she went to go put it back up. Another night, the wife was at home with the baby and she heard what sounded like someone trying to get into the house. She called her husband immediately and he told her to call the cops right away. She called the cops. They came over and they said that they didn't notice any signs of someone trying to get in or anyone on the property. They did, however, notice that there were signs of something moving inside. One warm summer day, the husband went up to the attic to fix something. He was completely thrown off because the attic was freezing cold. He then asked the wife if she had noticed anything odd happening, like things being misplaced. They then shared their stories, and the wife went to the library one day to look into the history of the house. She noticed that the house had been sold several times and that nobody really stayed for too long. She also found records that a man had committed suicide in the basement. He was a professional clown. The family sold the house and moved into a new one. Years later, the wife was driving past the house with her children, one who was a baby at the time in the house, and one that was born after they moved. The wife said to the children as they drove past, "Look, that's where we used to live." The daughter recalled, "Yeah, there was a clown there. He would come into my room at night." As the daughter had grown over the years, she had always been very afraid of clowns. The mother didn't want to scare her, so she said that it was probably a stuffed animal that they had. The child then responded, "No, it was the size of Daddy." Super creepy. She told us that one when we were driving back from dinner in our car, and my mouth was just wide open the entire time. Shook. Okay, next one. Okay, this next one is from my mom. This is an experience that her friend had. So I just wrote it in my point of view. So my mom has a friend who used to live in Winneconne. Her friend lived in a house and had noticed that the door frame was wider than usual. She eventually discovered that it was made that way so that they could haul caskets through the door frame. The house used to be an old funeral home. The friend had a dog, and oftentimes the dog would go to the same corner within a room and bark continuously at the corner. Yeah, sign me up for moving the next day. I'm out of there. Now I have a couple from my friend. This was not her personal experience. This was one of her friends as well. So here's the first one. My friend has had a few experiences in her parents' house, such as seeing a man in her bedroom smiling at her and then hearing a little girl run down their stairs. No thanks. Absolutely not. This is her second one. My mom's friend built a house on land where there was this really old shack, and they believed a ghost named Carl lived there. He would communicate with their daughter. When they built the house, their daughter said that his one request was to have a chair on their porch facing where his shack was, and when they put the chair there, all activity stopped. Friendly ghost situation, but also super weird. Next story is an entry from my college roommate's mom. She says, our toaster used to pop up on its own. No one was making toast, and we would all be together in the living room. Our daughter could also hear footsteps upstairs at times, and no one else was home. She called him Henry. This next story is one that is not from Wisconsin. I found this in a real estate group that I'm in on Facebook, and I just thought it was crazy, so I had to add it to my list. Alright, she says, I've always been super intuitive to energies, good and bad. Today, I hosted an open house for a friend. It started at 1 p.m. I texted him because something just felt weird, and there were some interesting noises I kept hearing, like a weird click. He calls me an hour later and says, so it's really strange that you asked that question. The home is bank-owned, and the former owner shot himself on the deck. The weird click literally sounded like the cock of a gun. Okay, this next one creeped me out real good. I asked the cheer kids that I coach for in high school if they maybe had any haunted house stories, and most of them looked at me and said yes. So I was like, okay, send me them later tonight. So I got a few of them. These are these next few. They're from the cheer kids, and I'll tell you what, I would be traumatized. So this one is super creepy. Alright, they say, I used to live in an apartment above an old cafe in Poughkeepsie. We owned the building as a whole, but kept most of our life upstairs in the apartments. It was February 2020, and I was just recovering from a horrible flu. I was trying to sleep around 11 o'clock at night when I started to hear a nail scratching on my window. My room was on the second floor, which made it impossible for someone to reach. My dog started freaking out in the room next to me, and I tried to get up to go calm him down. When I rolled over, there was a tall creature with long arms that dragged on the floor. We just kind of stared at each other for a good minute, and then he walked out of the room. My door was open even though I had never opened it. I frantically called my mom on the phone and was like, you know all the reports from the people who used to own this place saying there was some ghost? I just saw it and I would love for you to come home. I never did see it again over the next year that I lived there. That one is just, it's too good. It really is. I feel like I can visualize myself for some reason in the apartment, and like that's what makes it much creepier for some reason. Like I can just picture everything that's happening as they tell the story. Next entry is from another cheer kid. I'll tell you what, these kids just have gone through some stuff because I don't really have any crazy stories. I mean, knock on wood. But it's just insane to me. Most of these are freshmen in high school, and yeah, I'd be freaking out. So she says, when I was younger, I often had sleep paralysis. I saw a shadow figure every single time. It could be best described as a man with a coat and top hat. After about 2 months of having constant sleep issues, I began seeing the shadow figure while I walked around the house. We would find handprints that were too small or too large to be anyone's in the house. My dad also saw shadows and claimed to see someone eating pizza. The figure disappeared instantly. To this day, we still see shadows. I've had doors open and slammed shut, TVs randomly turn on, and creaking from the attic. Next story. I have a true story about my old house in Fond du Lac that my dad grew up in and we lived at for a while. When I was little, about 2 or 3 years old, I used to love watching scary movies. My mom rented a movie from the video store down the street, and there was a scene in the movie where the guy had shot himself in the head and fell back into a chair. I asked my mom to rewind the movie, and when she did, I said to her, "That looks like the guy who lives in our ceiling." Not knowing that in the 70s, my aunt and her friends skipped school and were intoxicated one day, her friend's boyfriend came over to the house because he thought she was cheating on him. He shot my aunt's friend and killed her, and then walked into the dining room and shot himself in the head and fell back into the chair. The chair that sat in a corner was the same corner that I pointed at to show my mom and said, "That's where the man lives, in the ceiling." Alright, we are on the fourth and final cheer kid entry, and then we move on to my own and then two of my coworkers' stories. So, here we go. Way before I was born and before my parents moved into the house, there was an old lady who was known as the witch. She was known for being mean and waving her gun at people who walked onto her property. Nobody liked her and tried to stay as far away as possible. One day, she died inside the house, and then my parents moved in. I was born soon after. 7 years later, me and my brother were four-wheeling on the property, which was surrounded by woods. At the time, I never knew about the lady who passed there, but me and my brother continued to go deeper into the woods. Then, I looked to my right and saw a lady. She had long gray hair, dark clothing, and was standing there with a blank stare. My brother never seemed to notice her, and he kept driving ahead. My child mind thought nothing of it, but for some reason, that moment and her blank stare is still etched into my brain. Yeah, it would be for me too. After I learned about this lady who passed and was shown a picture of her, I realized that the woman I saw when I was 7 was her. If you've made it this far, be sure to let me know what your favorite story is in the comments. We've still got 3 more, so stay tuned. You might have a new favorite by the end of this, but I would love to know what you think is the winning story. Alright, here's my own entry. So, this is about the house we're in right now. Creepy. I live with my brothers and cousin, and when I first showed my brother this house, I totally thought it was haunted. The listing photos were super creepy. In one of the rooms, there was a wooden rocking horse in the closet and what looked like scratch marks on the doors. He really loved the house, and I wasn't planning on living here at the time, so I didn't stress too much about the possibility of it being haunted. You know, who cares? Well, I later moved in with him. We haven't had too many crazy haunting experiences per se, but a couple of odd things have happened that I just felt like I would share. So we have old locks on the bedrooms where you screw the lock into the door frame and into the door itself, as opposed to the lock being on the door handle. So it's kind of almost like a latch thing that you pull over. And when we moved in, we noticed that all of these locks were on the outside of the doors instead of inside the doors, almost like people were locking others inside the bedroom rather to keep someone from coming in. My cousin mentioned that for a while he would wake up at exactly the same time each night, around midnight. His room is the one that had the rocking horse. I was like, I'm not taking that one. Our basement is a fairly creepy basement. You'll have that. It's an old house. But the old cistern was blown out partially. At our final walkthrough, we found an entire open bag of bread downstairs that was sitting on part of the old cistern, with one piece that was on the floor. The piece had a bite out of the center that looked like a human had taken the bite, not an animal. Definitely could have still been a human that was living here, but it was just super weird. And then personally, one odd thing has happened to me. So when I first got my cats, they were confined to my room. I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. I shut my bedroom door behind me so that the cats could not get out. And then when I came back to my room, I was about to put my hand on the door handle. I lifted my hand up, didn't put it on, and right in front of me, half awake, I watched the door handle turn on its own and my door opened. Honestly, I was so tired that I just looked at it and I was like, okay, whatever. One other odd thing is we also have 2 matching willow trees that are placed right next to each other on the property. And I did a little bit of research, and it can mean very different things. But in many cultures, the willow tree is often associated with grief and mourning. Interesting. Alright, these last 2 submissions are from my coworker. He's had a couple crazy experiences. So this first one goes like this. I had a 120-year-old Victorian home listed in downtown Appleton. I was present for a buyer showing where their little kids were running around the house, as it was quite a large house. The kids had gone down to the basement and came running up the stairs and through the kitchen towards the front of the house. As they were running, they casually looked back at the parents and stated, "There's a ghost down there." They just carried about their business, running around like excited children do. At the same time, myself, the buyer's agent, and the buyers were standing in the kitchen. There was a newer smart fridge there. The fridge started playing a song, but it was very staticky and choppy. In and out. I told the seller about it after the showing was over, and she asked if I was being serious because with the house being vacant, she did not have Wi-Fi service connected to the property. A couple of other unexplained things happened in that same house. There was an indent on one of the beds where someone had clearly sat, but nobody actually sat down. There was also a large indent of a handprint on the bed. Additionally, there was a lamp that was just moving on its own. And he actually does have picture and video proof of this, so that is pretty nuts. This last story is kind of an interaction that it's very interesting, the signs, but we're ending on a good note because it's not super creepy, it's actually very touching, and I love this story. So this is how his story goes. My friend Bob passed away unexpectedly in June of this year. The morning after he passed, I woke up and the clock was the first thing I saw. 8:08, spelled out Bob. When I helped him buy his condo last summer, the number one thing he loved about it was the fact that the doorbell played the Westminster chime. He was over the moon about it. The last time I saw him was to invite him to the first downtown lunchtime organ recital this summer. Unfortunately, he did not make it with me. However, the very last piece of that concert was the same tune that his doorbell plays. I'd like to think it was just him saying he was there. The next day, there was a large wet spot on my basement stairs and on the floor underneath the stairs. I tracked the source to an unopened gallon-sized jug of distilled water. Bob had given us a steam mop during his move because he didn't use it anymore. The gallon jug of distilled water came with it because he said that it was best to use distilled water to prevent calcification on the inside of the mop. Well, I didn't follow his advice and left the gallon-sized jug of water unopened, security ring still intact with the cap, and it sat there for months and months. As I mentioned, it was the source of the leak. I picked up the jug and discovered a pin-sized hole in the bottom. I literally looked up and I said, "Okay, Bob, that's enough," and nothing has happened since. I really hope that you have enjoyed these spooky stories and it has got you in the Halloween spirit. Remember to comment your favorite story down below. Hopefully it didn't creep you out too much, just enough, the perfect amount. Well, thanks for hanging out with me and getting cozy. Until next time, see ya!